You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined by Oliver Camacho and Weston Williams. All right, this week, the second ever World Opera Forum is set to kick off early next month in Los Angeles. To preview this global gathering, this United Nations of Opera, if you will, we go inside the huddle with an American delegate, Houston Grand Opera General Director and CEO Khori Dastoor. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, the royal news continues, and only 2 boos for a new ring cycle, so the crowd loved it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Spotify, click follow, Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. Hey, send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes on what we're talking about. Mailbag@operaboxscore.com. You can even just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say tab on the website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you're going to get the OBS beer coaster, the OBS lapel pin, and the #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. Oliver Camacho, take it away.
You know, I forgot to mention in last week's episode that Novak Djokovic was hit in the head by a water bottle.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. He was like signing autographs and like somebody's like water bottle.
Are we talking like a empty Dasani or full on Stanley?
Yeah, what if it
So preppy.
But in his next match, he lost badly, and it was just strange.
Probably a Stanley then.
Yeah, Novak Djokovic is not known to lose badly. Novak Djokovic has lost before, but he's not one to just kind of like crumble. You know, right. Yeah, it was. So the bottle appeared to be heavy, possibly stainless steel. Ouch. Anyway, but that's not. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, but that's not how.
That's not how we do. That's not how we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Weston Williams, ever been hit in the head?
Oh, absolutely. So many times. When you're my height, George, this is not a joke. I remember one Halloween where I ran into the same stop sign 4 times. And then, it was a wild night. But, that's why I'm bad at tennis.
Comic gold, my man. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
From June 3rd to June 5th, Opera America, in collaboration with Opera Europa, Opera Latinoamerica, and the Association for Opera in Canada, will host the second ever World Opera Forum, welcoming opera leaders from around the world to Los Angeles for a global conversation about the future of the art form. We're going to speak to one of the American delegates. The American delegates, by the way, include a friend of the show, Afton Battle, representing Lyric Opera of Chicago, James Dara, representing Long Beach Opera.
Keep those checks coming, Jimmy.
Timothy Long, I think he's a friend of the show, representing Eastman School of Music.
Tim O'Leary from Washington National.
National Opera. Yuval Sharon, who always declines to be interviewed by us.
Excellent. Good. It's good.
There's delegates from Zambia, from the UK, from the United Arab Emirates, Ukraine, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, South Korea, South Africa, Poland, New Zealand, Malaysia, Japan, Italy, India, Germany, France, Croatia, Colombia, China, Chile, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and Argentina. So there's expected to be plenty of debates and discussions and just good old networking. And there's also an event for the public, which we'll talk about after we hear this interview with Khori Dastoor, once again, representing Houston Grand Opera. I've been following Khori's sort of rise from singer to the general director of San Jose Opera to...
OBS guest?
Yeah, to replacing, is it Patrick Summers that she replaced? At Houston Grand Opera, or whoever she replaced, I forget. And now, finally, her greatest achievement as an Inside the Huddle guest of Opera Box Score. So we're going to go a little bit into her personal history, which we rarely do on Opera Box Score, but I thought it was very interesting. And to get us into this conversation, let's hear a little bit of the works and process video of their recent production of Intelligence from Houston Grand Opera.
I do this thing, I'll be chained to you forever, chained to you forever, chained to you. If I do this thing, I'll be chained to you forever, chained to you forever, to you. So goodbye. Yes, I have to survive.
Welcome to Opera Box Score. It's so exciting to finally get to meet you, Khori. I have been just sort of watching the ascent of your career, and I've always wanted to talk to you. And maybe I'm doing it for very selfish reasons because I want some of your advice on how to be so successful as you are.
Oh, please, Oliver.
Yeah. No. But because my audience knows that, I've been kind of chugging along in this arena of opera, and for whatever reason, doors just opened for you. And I know you worked very hard. So let's talk about how hard you worked to get eventually to Houston Grand Opera, but you started as a singer.
I did. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I too have been looking forward to this conversation for a while. Big fan from afar. I think you are such a great example of the authenticity that makes for a compelling conversation. And so thank you for your bravery in doing that. Was I a singer? Yes, I was. I started singing as a child, actually. Placido Domingo was in charge of LA Opera, which is where I grew up. And so I got to be in Hansel and Carmen and Tosca. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. And it was really hard to go back to the 6th grade musical after you've been in those kinds of shows.
Better costumes.
Yeah. And then I joined LACC, which is like a children's chorus. And that was my first trip to Europe without, I was on my own with my friends, not my parents, and we would tour the world. And it was just an incredible, talk about, doors opening. You're a 3rd grader and then you're singing with the Vienna Boys Choir overnight. So I guess I got addicted is what I would say. The singing part was always less enjoyable than all that other stuff. I did it for 15 years. I made great friends, did beautiful projects, got to see the world. And like one of my favorite experiences was singing something like 60 or 70 performances of the Pirates of Penzance at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, because you get this glimpse into this whole other medium. And the only thing you have in common is that you're creatives. And the vibe of being a creative, of being around other people who have dedicated their life to making interesting work and want to be in dialogue with each other, whether that's even tech or visual art or fashion. I'm just super into those people, those seekers of truth, seekers of beauty. Those are my peeps. So it was a little bit of staying in the career because I wanted to be around that. And, it's a glamour profession. It becomes kind of your identity. It's not just a job. And then all the people in your life are really invested in getting to come see you and support. But if I'm honest, for the last 3-4 years, it was just relief when the performances would be complete because I love the rehearsal. I love the process, but the living out of a suitcase, the never seeing my family, the missing weddings, funerals, and important events of my people's lives, the not being able to really feel in control of my destiny didn't really suit my personality. And I knew that my talent wasn't at the level of my colleagues that were going to have international careers. So I was just excited to be around it, but I think afraid of the next chapter. And if there's one thing I would offer to people, it's that whatever makes you afraid, that's where you need to focus your attention. We're getting I'm getting right into it, Oliver.
Yeah.
As a singer, you learn, you're like, what's my top 5? What do I do best? Where do I shine? How do I differentiate myself? I have 16 bars to play to my strengths. And we get really good at honing that and ignoring the stuff that you have no idea how to do. And if you want to get better in life at anything, whether it's leadership or performance or personal brand or financial growth or anything, you have to say, this is the thing that's spooking me the most. And because of that, I'm avoiding it. I'm pushing it back. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it. And when you get practiced at tackling those things, then this sort of self-esteem builds in and you start to feel unstoppable. And that has real power to it.
Wow, this just became a life coaching session. You said so many things that I want to circle back to, especially about missing family and wanting to be there. But you also talked about, and we're going to get back to that topic. But you also talked about wanting to be connected to the truth seekers and the creators, and with essentially beauty. You're talking about beauty, and that you feel like it's your job to connect people to beauty. That's what you can do. And that resonates with me so much that I feel like we have to stop recording, just like talk. But we're here to talk about other things. So you started to go into arts administration, and I know one of your big jobs before Houston was your various roles at Opera San Jose. But I think I understand there's a couple steps along the way.
Yeah, well, so I was a resident artist at Opera San Jose, which was sort of Irene Dallas giving me my first, okay, you say you want to be a singer. I was getting a doctorate at UCLA, writing a thesis on Jay Keggy, who at that time no one had heard of. And I got this job, and I think the first season was like Gilda, Lucia, Pamina, and Sophie and Berter. The first season, and I was like,
couple of
wow,
roles.
Okay. But it was sort of a fest in the United States, the opportunity to be in one place and to really actually not be 6 weeks at a time, but a full season of being an opera singer in a variety of roles. So it was a really formative time. But when after it launched my sort of performance stuff, I was living in Switzerland and feeling ready for a new chapter. It was David Woodley Packard, who I had met through Opera San Jose, the son of the founder of HP, who had a family foundation, who gave me a job in grants administration, a very non-glamorous job, very day-to-day figuring out the tax code, understanding how money is given away domestically and abroad, what tax requirements are required. And I ended up spending about 11 years working for David, eventually becoming sort of the second in command at his family foundation, had the opportunity there to learn about organizational health and how boards function, setting philanthropic priorities, how you measure outcomes, how you select projects. We would get so many proposals, and really got to be in the room where it happens, I guess, when all this money was given away, and got to see projects all over the world, whether that was a museum in Italy or the Mozarteum in Salzburg or, a conservation project in the Middle East. So I can't speak more highly of my experience at the foundation, just being entrusted with the various roles that I held there. And also, understanding the commerce of art, what works and what doesn't. How, the amount of money is really secondary to the team, the people. And what I have seen works really well for creative endeavors is empowering the voice of an artist, a singular voice that is unique in the world, and providing that singular voice with the resources they need to have their vision fulfilled. When you start to make decisions by committee and dilute that vision, then kind of no one's happy. So yes, my job is to, seek out the truth seekers and the beauty makers, and then provide them an environment where their vision can come to fruition. And that means protecting it. That means resourcing it. That means being an ambassador for it. That means supporting them when they don't believe in it. And that means aligning their skills with a project that's going to yield success. So you don't have someone who has a really deep intrinsic understanding of the German repertoire try to do something in bel canto if that's not what they know how to do, right? Because it's my job as producer to set people up for success. And that comes with casting, that comes with hiring, that comes with marketing. Anything that I'm really doing, I'm trying to curate the most successful outcome for everybody.
In an industry that is, to a certain extent, shrinking, and where a lot of administrators are operating under sort of like the environment of loss management, loss control, how do you...
Oh, no. It's change management.
Change management. Okay. Better verbiage there. How do you convince the purse that, this type of growth, this type of collaboration, this type of innovation is where we can grow. Because I sense the fight against change everywhere. And I'm in all sorts of fields of the arts. And I was like, ugh, everybody just wants to like hang on to what's left and try not to lose any more, you know?
I don't think that's my experience.
Good.
I think the opposite. I think sometimes we as leaders aren't optimistic enough. And we kind of expect that if we are transparent about the challenges and the burdens that our industry faces, our company faces, the shifts we've seen in arts and culture in general, that sharing the problems is enough, and we can say, okay, here's why this is harder and more expensive, so now give us more money. But we're not actually presenting a solution to that problem. It's like, hey, we really need to make payroll, so I need this money from you, or I promised I would do the ring cycle and now I can't afford it, so help bail me out. Right? That isn't a recipe for inspiring investment. The first rule of change management, as any student of Kotter will tell you, is manufacturing urgency. So if we don't understand as artists and creators why change is necessary, then we're not going to change, and we're not going to inspire others to change with us. But of course it's necessary. You have only to look at, and I think that's the beauty of a pandemic or a hurricane or anything else. You have this ready-made urgency. And during those moments of crisis, we've really seen donors stick by our companies. They give more. They show us how much they care. And what we need to do in return is give them something that makes sense. Give them something that's sustainable, that has a future, that passes the reasonable test, and that doesn't cost so much for one household to experience that it's absolutely untenable. And I think it's okay that we're in competition for those philanthropic dollars. I think it's okay that the new generation of wealth in our nation have different priorities. And I have found that, because the markets are strong and because, people are feeling that they can come out again from their homes safely, that there is a lot of opportunity. But I'm not discounting the challenges, but I think the change has already happened. You don't really have to fight for it. It's 79% of the people in my city under the age of 5 speak Spanish as their first language. So there's the change is happening everywhere. There's nothing to fight about.
One of the biggest pushbacks I sense in my current role at my job is the identity stuff, and the gatekeeping audience, who mean very well in their gatekeeping. I think they want to protect something that they want to protect a tradition. They see the identity stuff as a threat, and making space for it is limiting access to more Beethoven. So if you don't mind, if we just take a little detour really quickly about your own identity. One of the remarkable things from the beginning of this conversation was that I learned that you have been in this business since you've been a child, and maybe because you have always navigated these spaces, you've never felt that you were different, that you were a person of color, that you were something that is not like the other, and I've always, as a singer, I've always noticed
every kid feels different. Every brown kid of immigrants feels different. I certainly was different from my friends, and being into opera didn't make me less of an outsider. But I do think, you're right. There's a section in my state. I live in Texas. There's a section of people for whom the identity stuff is some trigger for them, right? Mm-hmm. Like they really freak out about it. And what they want to hear, and which I share, is that there are elements of what we do that transcend our identities. And I talk about my identity in that context. I'll give you an example. I was invited recently to give the commencement address at the University of Houston McGovern School graduation. And I shared sort of, my parents weren't artists, neither one of them, but one of them got on a boat in, from never having left Bombay didn't know anybody, took 5 weeks to get to the United States, ended up in Ohio, with sort of the dreams of his whole family and generation and country on his shoulders. And my mom was born in Japanese occupied Dutch East Indies during World War II in like a war camp, and didn't meet her father until after World War II, and then went back, in Indonesia, went back to Holland, then found their way in the 60s when, the immigration laws all changed. And so these two kids sort of without country and without any connection to their tribes or clans found each other in Akron, Ohio. And their common language was really, Mahler or The Marriage of Figaro or Leonard Cohen or whatever. And my whole time growing up in my family, just understanding how these pieces of who they were, both, the Mughal paintings and the Delft blue pottery and the way the symbols of their history could coexist in a home, and then their shared love of Western classical music, of opera, of symphony. And that's what we would do because we didn't have the same religion. They didn't speak the same language. We didn't eat the same foods. Like, it was always sort of a mishmash of things. And in music and opera and going to the Hollywood Bowl or whatever, we found kind of a shared language. And that is what's so powerful about maintaining this repertoire, is that, yes, it's created in a context and whatever, but it doesn't belong to anybody because it belongs to all of us, because we all have an intrinsic right to interact with it. And what you do and what I do is the same. And what the gatekeepers fail to acknowledge is that's keeping it, that's preserving it. If everyone who loves it is dead, it's gone. You have to, if you love it and you want to preserve it, you have to inspire future generations to find their own personal relationship with it and fall in love with it. And if it's difficult to fall in love with Madame Butterfly because it dehumanizes you and causes you pain and suffering, then it is in my best interest, Khori, producer of Madame Butterfly, to find a way to take away that harm so you can understand and fall in love with Puccini in a way that doesn't harm you. So I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever find an answer, but certainly not talking about it. Like I said, avoiding the topics that make you most afraid is not the way to progress.
Well, I was harmed by Madame Butterfly this past weekend. Asmik Grigorian was incredible. And you hear about, there are these singers who's like, oh yeah, people talk about, I'm sure she's fine. But then you see them, it's like, oh wow, no, she knows how to twist the knife. You're making me,
killed me. She slayed me. No joke.
I would love to have heard it. Well, you mentioned Eileen, so I'm glad that we can pivot really quickly to the current season, upcoming season of Houston. Eileen Perez singing Trovatore with Michael Spires. I'm desperate to hear Michael Spires. I'm crazy about him. And Lucas Meacham, my friend.
Oh my gosh. I saw Eileen and Rehan do their magic thing in Rusalka at Santa Fe. And I thought,
me too. Yeah. And then I understand that Isabel Leonard is doing some kind of stage direction for Cenerentola. She's okay.
She's our resplendent Maria in Sound of Music. And she just sang Charlotte in Werther with Matthew Polenzani at Houston. We'll be releasing that recording later this year. First woman to have my position, first person of color to have my position. But for me, the whole thing is set up assuming that you don't have a family. So I remember, Callis, like all these women who you were a hooker, you had a life on stage, which was kind of like being a hooker, or you fulfilled what society said you should do and you were a wife and mom, right? So that was the paradigm for a very long time. And I think that's really impacted many lives in opera. The idea that you would sacrifice for your art and that you would forego having close relationships or having, successful partnerships or the choice to be a mom, that it was sort of a selfish choice to have children if you wanted to pursue a career in the arts. I don't think I ever said that out loud, but I certainly internalized it. And I remember when I was deciding to leave performance that I thought, I'm going to want to be a parent. And that really contributed to why I thought I needed to figure something else out. It was Renee who wrote in her autobiography about raising Sage and Amelia that kind of for the first time was articulating a model for doing all of this and having this whole self of who she was be visible in her public persona, which was really pioneering at the time. Now I'm surrounded by parents who amaze me. Ryan and Tanya McKinney, Sasha Cook and Kelly Markgraf, Isabel doing it as a single mom everywhere. Louisa Muller. I mean, everybody is figuring this out. It's not pretty, but they're supporting each other and talking about it. And it's really important that we do. So I got to chatting with Isabel about, the women who had portrayed Cenerentola at Houston Grand Opera in our history. Maria Ewing, Joyce DiDonato, Cecilia Bartoli's debut, and now Isabel. And I thought there's something powerful to the public. I don't mean you and me, right? Because we know the piece, but people who don't know anything about opera, there's something powerful around, oh my gosh, Isabel Leonard I've heard of. She's on Sesame Street. She sang with Bocelli at Madison Square Garden. She's in all those movies. And her signature role, or a role that's really closely associated with her personal brand, how would she unlock that story and that music through the perspective of having raised a human or in the process of raising a human? And we talked more and more about it. Isabel's incredibly entrepreneurial. She has a strong point of view. She has artistic and creative projects that she's really invested in, and more artists do. When I'm talking to them, they're thinking like if I ran a company one day, they're thinking if I directed this one day. Pat Rissette, everyone has really important knowledge to share. Isabel's is informed by her experience as a mother, and she's curating something really special for the kids of Houston in November. And I just think it's going to go really far. I don't, at the beginning of things, you never know what they will be, but I am really committed to empowering parents who are also creators to create products and programming for kids. I think that's a no-brainer.
Well, I'm so glad you did that without me prompting you, because that was one of the questions I had for you as a person of color and as a parent. How do you, model your company for the future generation of parent women, people of color leaders? And it sounds like it's already the action plan is already in place. I wanted to touch quickly on the cast for Bohème. You have Yaritza Vélez, who we will all hear at Santa Fe this year. I've never heard her sing before.
You will hear her for years to come. She, 22 years old, walked onto the stage of the Wortham from Chile, sang one aria, and we had our Mimi. I mean, this is a voice you will see. You will hear.
Speaking of model administrators, Francesca Zambello directing West Side Story. There's a Tannhäuser with our friend Russell Thomas. But Breaking the Waves is the show that sort of falls into the model that seems to be created in your seasons. You've already done The Wreckers and The Snowy Day, which was a new opera, and another new opera, Intelligence. Are these projects your projects, or did you kind of inherit this course of doing these newer operas, or these operas by marginalized composers?
I was so fortunate because of COVID. Things were all up in the air, and I got to have an impact right away. And we had a lot of wonderful art in the pipeline. Intelligence, Jawole, Jake, and Jean, that was an 8-year journey. But I could immediately decide to open our season with it. That was my decision. And, I could immediately decide to where things went, which season to go. So, and I did have the opportunity also to discard some projects that I think didn't fit the moment. So I stand behind all these seasons. The model is an interesting one. We have in Houston, as the #1 relocation destination, an incredible influx of new Houstonians coming here all the time. So yes, it makes sense to do La Bohème because many of our people are coming to the Wortham for the very first time. Something like 67, 67% of our single ticket buyers. So it's important to me, like with a Tannhäuser, that we're presenting, or even a Trovatore, we're presenting repertoire to these people in the first blush. So it has to look contemporary. It has to have the best singers in the world, but the story has to make sense. You have to have something. We're having 2 new productions here. We're really going for a bold modern aesthetic, but it has to be musically, I think, meeting people where they are. Tannhäuser is a perfect first Wagner experience for many, many reasons, very recognizable. Breaking the Waves is, to me, one of the great masterworks of American opera. And if not at HGO, if we're going to continue to sort of be a standard bearer for new American work, then these pieces like Breaking the Waves belong on our stage. The Wreckers belongs on the greatest stages of the world. It's just that good. And it's too bad that Ethel Smythe lived at a time when she wasn't really taken seriously, but you can't listen to that music and not take her seriously as an important compositional voice. So it was a tremendous joy to be able to do that. And it's really a testament to David Gockley's legacy that I have a public that expects that they understand that they're going to be on a journey of discovery with us. But I also really want to expand access to the art form. And that means not niching myself into oblivion, right? I really want to produce things that everyone can enjoy.
Well, we only have a few minutes remaining, but I invited you on to talk about the World Opera Forum, which is happening just in a few weeks. I would just love to hear a little bit more about your specific involvement with Opera America and what this forum is about.
Well, it's been such a tremendous honor to serve on the board of Opera America, and what transformation we've seen in these years. It was Opera America who held us all together with those Zooms, and when we didn't know what to do, we were able to kind of pool our resources and get each other through it. The World Opera Forum is one of the most exciting things because in Houston, we have an incredibly global city. We have oil and gas. We have the largest medical center in the world. We have people from all over. I think there's something like 72 languages spoken at my children's elementary schools, to give you a sense. And that means that my community has strong relationships all over the world, and we can be in cultural dialogue and exchange with our colleagues all over the world. There's a tremendous influx of investment in opera in Asia right now. HGO certainly seeks to understand and learn more about that. The population of Southeast Asians in my city is booming. I'm already in conversation with companies in Bombay about how we, create a pathway there. Our studio, our Butler studio, we hear audition videos from all over the world, So when you see Concert of Arias, you're seeing singers from Armenia, from China, from Korea, from Russia, who've never left their home nations, who may end up in my studio. So the opportunity to be in dialogue with opera leaders from all over the world, come together as a global community is just exactly where we need to be focusing our effort. And I'm so inspired that so many, I was in Barcelona just a couple of weeks ago, and my counterpart there was like, I'll see you at the World Opera Forum. So everyone is really understanding why this is good and participating. So I can't wait to be there.
What do you think the deliverables will be for the audiences as a result of this type of meeting of the minds?
I think we used to think of co-producers very narrowly, like you put in X dollars, I put in X dollars. So if my X and your X isn't the same, then we can't co-produce, right? And those days are really over. Whether it's digital work, casting, everything's on the table around how we collaborate and help each other. I think the ultimate goal is that there's mutual benefit, that by my interacting with your company and you're interacting with mine, that we both are stronger for it. And we've seen that sort of collaboration as an important part of the future. When HGO was creating the mariachi operas, we workshopped them at the Bellas Artes in Mexico City, and their input in helping shape what those works would be was essential for how successful they became. And they've now been performed in 36 countries. So there's a number of ways that we can seek to create alignment and collaboration that will benefit the art form and benefit our constituencies. But I do think you're right that we're just getting started and figuring it out.
Well, our time is up, unfortunately, but through the course of this conversation, you dangled all these strings that I wanted to pull on, but there's just not enough time. But it's clear why you are in the position that you're in. It was really great for me to meet you and to hear so many of your ideas, and I look forward to more.
Thanks for having me.
So I did send an interview outline to Khori, but I promise you that so much of that conversation, I had no plan that we were going to get into it. I just really am so impressed with, how quick she is to have a really thoughtful answer to my questions, and how there were just so many strings that she left for us to pull on. So, I'm so impressed with her, and what a great get for Houston Grand Opera. And for the Opera Forum, that everybody gets to meet her and ask her the same questions. Maybe this interview will inspire some of the conversation at the Opera Forum.
Thanks to Lucy Media for coordinating the interview with Khori Dastoor. So to scratch their backs a little, we're meant to point all of you in the LA area towards Opera Fest, time to coincide with the World Opera Forum. The week-long festival features performances from LA Opera, Beth Morrison Projects, Long Beach Opera, Pacific Opera Project, Synchrony, Mission Opera, and Overtone Industries. And those works range from innovative interpretations of the standard canon to premieres from award-winning composers, workshops of new works, and screenings of opera films. It showcases the breadth and artistic diversity found in LA's burgeoning opera scene. Opera Fest begins June 1st. More information can be found at operaboxscore.com. In other news, the 2-minute drill begins right now.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The Salzburg Mozarteum and friends of the show Santa Fe Opera have unveiled their 2025 seasons. More after the drill.
The audience of last week's gala celebrating Antonio Pappano's 22-year tenure as music director of the Royal Opera House was a veritable who's who of the industry, much like the Met Gala, but with gowns that are easier to sing in. Performers included Jonas Kaufmann, Nadine Sierra, Sondra Radwanovsky, Bryn Tervel, Emanueleja Yaho, and friends of the show Lisette Oropeza and Hugh Montague Rendell. The Guardian reported that Pappano was, quote, on home territory with the evening's mainly Italian repertoire, largely duets and ensembles, with not a solo aria to be heard. Pappano steered clear of works that he has conducted most often, no Wagner, and of Mozart only the Figaro Overture. Not a single note all evening was written after 1910, a regrettable choice. And presumably none of it was performed in a church basement.
Ouch. At the end of the gala, King Charles III, patron of the Royal Opera House since 2009 and the president of the Royal Ballet since 2003, made a surprise appearance, receiving a standing ovation. Said Pappano, "It was a huge honor to welcome His Majesty to this wonderful evening alongside the remarkable orchestra, chorus, and unrivaled ensemble cast of dear friends and longtime collaborators."
130 children took part in a sleepover at the Rome Opera House, part of a campaign to make up for flagging music education in Italy. With little backing from schools or lawmakers, arts organizations have concluded that it's up to them to reach out to the young. Rome Opera's general manager, Francesco Gembrone, told the children, "The theater is a place where what is impossible becomes possible."
Welsh National Opera is set to present The Very Last Green Thing, an eco-friendly opera for young audiences with music by Carrie John Franklin and text by Michael Patrick Albano. The production's props and costumes will consist of recycled materials, with many items being previously owned or repurposed from older productions. Performances are this weekend in Cardiff, and hopefully Extinction Rebellion will not stage a protest.
Conductor Gianandrea Nozeda and director Andreas Homocki have created a counter-revolutionary version of Wagner's Ring Cycle at the Zurich Opera House. Taking advantage of the smaller venue to pare down the orchestration, the production also employed relatively minimal scenery to focus on intimate character relationships. Quote, "Sometimes you just have to clear away the rubbish," said Homocki, "and the people say, oh no, it was just the rubbish that we loved so much." Okay, then too bad. The curtain call after the first cycle sparked 13 minutes of applause, and only 1 or 2 people booed.
Swedish bass baritone Christopher Teira has won the 2024 Mogren Music Prize with an award of around $23,000. The prize's goal is to support young, promising musicians in the beginning of their careers in the hopes of facilitating their step into the arts.
In trade news, the Iceland Symphony Orchestra has announced the appointment of friend of the show, Barbara Hannigan, as its chief conductor and artistic director starting in 2026. It's her first leadership role for an orchestra, despite the OBS bump.
Northwestern University's Beanan School of Music has announced Norman Reinhardt will join its vocal faculty as artist in residence. Reinhardt is a tenor who has recently made debuts in Shenzhen, China as Don José and English National Opera as Tamino. This year he will sing Polone in Norma in Strasbourg and make his debut at Northern Ireland Opera as Lenski in Eugene Onegin. In previous seasons, he has appeared at the Salzburg Festival, Teatro Real, Semperoper Dresden, Berlin Staatsoper, Festival Baden-Baden, Houston Grand Opera, Hamburg State Opera, and many others.
And on this day, May 20th, in 1786, it was the first performance of Giuseppe Gazzaniga's Circe in Venice. In 1890, Italian lyric tenor Beniamino Gigli was born in Recanati. In 1896, the 6-ton chandelier of the Palais Garnier Opera House in Paris fell on the crowd, resulting in the death of one and the injury of many others. In 1925, American baritone Chester Ludgren was born in Brooklyn. In 1950, it was the first performance of Luigi Dalla Piccola's Il Prigioniero in Florence. And on this day, May 20th, in 2011, it was the first performance of Superflumina, an opera by Salvatore Sciarrino in Mannheim.
And that is your 2-minute drill.
Marta, Marta, tu sparisti e il mio cuore con tuo andò. Tu la pace mi rapisti. Di amor io ne vorrò, di dolor morrò,
Just a little bit of Beniamino Gigli from an old 1923 Victor recording, singing Mappari from Flotow's Martha. I just wanted people to hear just like the histrionics. We don't get that so much anymore, but like all the sighing, the loud breathing, the little, tenorial sob.
Drama.
Yeah, I love it. And plus, it's such an Italianate sound. And, yes, Beniamino Gigli could sing heroically, but Marta, that aria, Mappari, is so high, and you've got to be able to just bring out those bright vowels to make those notes ring. And yeah, he was a model for that.
The Mozarteum has announced its festival that kicks off at
Mozarteum.
It starts in the beginning of 2025 with a variety of concerts, staged productions. What is exciting to you, Oliver, about this program? What are we going to fly you out to go and see?
Rolando Villazón collaborating with L'Arpeggiata, which is one of my favorite continuo bands, in Orfeo. This time he gets to sing the Monteverdi Orfeo as opposed to the Nico Muhly Orfeo.
Nice.
Obviously, this is not quite my era, but I'm interested in this Das Alexanderfest by Handel / Mozart, whatever that means. I assume Mozart reorchestrated a Handel work.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. Mozart did orchestrate a bunch of Handel oratorios.
Yes, very much so. There's also Mozart's C minor Mass, which is actually quite good.
Ooh, I just noticed something that I really want to hear, or I would want to hear. Lautenkompanie Berlin.
Yeah.
Which is another very sexy continuo band that does a lot of crossover. They will perform like Kurt Weill and put it right next to Schutz or something like that. So yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, we also have Sonia Yoncheva headlining a gala on the 27th with music by Handel. with Thomas Gugeis conducting the new Vienna Philharmonic, which will always be a good time. Oksana Leniv is making waves through Europe. She's performing also with the with Vienna Philharmonic. Music of Handel featured, along with Juan Diego Flores, who is taking a break from his increasing forays into French romantic repertoire, and singing some Mozart and Handel for us. This is good. I think overall, if you are into the sort of the classical era proper, this is the place to go. Oh, I'm just now noticing that we've also got friend of the show, Yeston Davies, singing Handel with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, as well. And that's going to be great. I love his voice. I love his interpretations of Handel specifically. This is one of those things that, this is not my era of music.
Yeah, because it's actually more high Baroque than you think, so. But that's okay.
Oliver is looking at me with judgment in his eyes.
No, it's fine. It means a lot to me, that music. So
let's flip over to Santa Fe.
New production of La Boheme, revival of the Figaro that they did in 2021, Rigoletto in a new co-production, Turn of the Screw, Canadian opera production, and Valkyrie. So they're sticking with 5 operas.
Right.
What's unusual is that there's no world premiere in this season. They've been doing Butterfly. We had Lord of Cries. We're getting The Righteous this summer.
Exactly.
So this sort of breaks that pattern. So the most modern show is Turn of the Screw. It's clear they're spending all their money on doing Valkyria.
With some good soloists, too. We got Ryan Speedo Green, Tamara Wilson in there, Solomon Howard.
So let's go through each one. And then George, you can comment as we go along. La Boheme will feature Emily Pogarelts as Musetta, friend of the show, and friend of the show Solomon Howard as Colline. Marriage of Figaro, I don't think has any friends of the show except for Harry Bickett. A bunch of singers who are new to me. Florian Sempe, I've heard of him. Marina Monzo, I've heard of her. Hong Ji-woo, I've heard of her. Liv Redpath just sang Oscar at the Met. Then we go to Rigoletto, which has Duke Kim, friend of the show, as the Duke, which is great. Really cool that Duke was an apprentice artist and now he is singing a lead role. And same with Elena Villalon. She's going to be there this summer in The Righteous, and she was in Falstaff 2 years ago, and she'll be singing Gilda. Turn of the Screw, conducted by Gemma New, which is really exciting.
That's cool.
Anything you want to say about those 3 shows before we move on?
Well, I mean, the only thing that's unusual is how conservative they are. It's like 3 big opera composers. I mean, these are great directors. There's nothing about that repertoire that I find particularly exciting. I think these directors are fantastic, but that's just me. And then I don't know why you would just do Die Walküre, why you wouldn't just start at the beginning of the cycle. If you're doing a new production, which first of all, it's a company premiere, and you're doing a new production, this seems odd to kind of start. I mean,
well, they're not really a Wagner, house. They've only
don't
done
program Wagner at all. I don't like.
It's a fair critique. They've only ever done Tristan and Flying Dutchman. That's only Tristan and Flying Dutchman, just in the past few years.
Right.
We've got a little bit of Wagner sort of sneaking in here. Now, I would love, personally, I think it'd be rad as hell if they did like a full cycle at Santa Fe Opera, but I'm not sure if that's quite their brand to devote everything to just one composer.
And the way that their season works, they do... they open 2 operas and then they wait a couple of weeks and then they open the third.
Yeah, exactly.
Ryan Speedo Green, friend of the show, making his debut as Wotan. Very exciting. That is news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Friend of the show, Solomon Howard, singing Hunding. Tamara Wilson, singing Brunhilde. Amazing. And a soprano whose name I learned how to pronounce, so I'm going to pronounce it here for you all. Making her American debut as Sieglinde, the Lithuanian-born Vida Minkevičiūtė. I did it. So when you look at that name, you're like, what? How do I do that? But I did it for you there. So
I mean, it's a really exciting cast, genuinely. Like, I mean, you know me. This would be the one. Like, if I'm only going to go see one, I'm always going to see a Valkyra. I think overall, it's a lot of kind of war horses, but even the war horses, I feel like Santa Fe does well. And of course, it's all about the experience and being with all the other opera people in the know. This is one of those seasons that I'm like, if I can scrounge together enough pennies, I'm gonna go and see it.
I think we all know that's not going to happen. I want to get over to this counter-revolutionary ring cycle in Zurich. So this is in the Zurich Opera House, and this is important. So it's about 1,100 seats, which is small for an opera house size. And Gian Andrea Nozeda, who's conducting, has made this choice to reduce the orchestration, pointedly noting that he's using just 2 harps instead of 6.
The excesses of the
harp is
era
so loud.
will not stand.
So then the German director Andreas Homucki is directing this, and has, as Weston quoted him, is like, well, we're just going to get kind of rid of all the rubbish. And then I look at the production photographs, which predictably the chorus enter dressed up as horses with spears. Then there's an image of an enormous tree and a man on fire.
That looks scary, that picture.
What's strange to me is that, in this sort of outreach related to this production, they're labeling it as counter-revolutionary. This is that the quote is pulled directly from the Associated Press article. That was not us calling it counter-revolutionary. And it seems, I think, at least based on the look, kind of par for the course for European production, with maybe more of an emphasis on character interaction a la, at an American company versus a hardcore Regie Theater, everything represents something kind of thing. And looking at it and the paring down of the orchestra, I think is something that really often works really well for Wagner. A lot of his earlier operas are often performed with much larger orchestras than were originally intended by Wagner.
Right.
Not so much with the ring cycle, but I can see that really working. I kind of like the idea of having some intimacy, especially in something like Die Valkyrie, with some of the, a really nice, intimate, soft, Abschied at the end of Valkyrie would be really cool. And there's other really cool moments.
Don't, of course, forget the Rhine maidens in pajamas with Marilyn Monroe platinum wigs. Nobody try and tell me that this isn't like Eurotrash Regie Theater. I don't buy that.
Well, I think it's more in the philosophy of how the characters interact. Like the characters... the way they're talking about it, Homoki seems to really want the characters to interact as if they were characters. Whereas the difference, I think, in the minds of the company seems to be Regie Theater is like, they don't care about the characters. They think the stories are silly, but allegorically very potentially profound if you pull stuff out of it. And, it's kind of an interesting twist because to your average, I think, American opera goer, I don't think they'd be able to tell the difference between this and any old Regie Theater production. But at the same time, I do think that, when you are committing to it by paring down the orchestra, you can create something, a sound and an experience that is actually unusual for most Wagner productions.
That is the most interesting choice.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We only talked about the harps, but there was also a reduction of the number of basses. There was only 4 double basses rather than 8. And Nozeda's idea that because it's an 1,100 seat house, that the singers could be more elegant and could be, sing more soft than not. I don't think singers know, but the general audience, I think, doesn't know how hard it is to sing over the Wagner orchestra. They just
exactly.
So just to give somebody like a chance, like Camilla Nyland, who is making, I believe, her debut as Brunhilde in this production, just a chance to sing it and go for phrases and go for a little more artistry, and not just the sheer athleticism of having to be heard over the Wagner Orchestra.
And this is very on brand for the Zurich Opera as well. I've been there for a couple of productions, and it's they like to pare things down dramatically in order to create more of a direct emotional response. And it is a slightly smaller house. I think if you really tried hard, you could probably cram a Wagner orchestra in there if you got creative, but certainly this will be easier on the budget at the very least.
Quick hits on Royal Opera House. The main reason for that story is just to say that, that seems like a really cool event. And I only named like a third of the artists who appeared in that gala concert. And I hope that becomes available to us in some way, a video or one of those Apple exclusive, releases. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear that, especially for my boy Hugh. And the idea that King Charles was there, meaning that he's returning to some of his public duties after his cancer diagnosis, which is good news. We got 2 children's stories to round out the drill. One about even Italy, struggling with, the school system not, centering classical music. And you would think maybe in Germany it's fine, but in Italy, I thought that opera was like the national pastime.
Absolutely.
Well, the sort of point that this article makes, which I'm sure we can put on our website, is that there's in the U.S., for example, the problem is sort of a lack of respect for the arts. In Italy, the problem seems to be complacency. We invented opera. It is who we are. It's a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. So why do we need to bother teaching about it? Because everybody knows about it.
So the eco-friendly opera, to me, has a very dystopian name. The very last green thing sounds so sad. I'm
waiting for that solar punk opera where we get good news about climate change instead of the sad stuff.
The quick hit here too is that this ties into the upcoming Glyndebourne season, which we talked about on the show last week, right? Which is also commissioned a eco opera of sorts, the Mark Anthony Turnage piece. And look, this is a nation that is terrified of climate change. Why? Because it's an island, obviously. And so they are trying to do everything within their power because their government is failing them. They're trying to do everything with their power in terms of the arts to make these stories present.
That's what you got to do.
And on that cheerful note, let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call to wrap things up on the show this week, starting with Oliver Camacho.
So in my work, I have to attend many different performances. Some
you
that I
get to attend.
Yeah, well, some that I really enjoy being at, and some where I go, it's like, okay, I'm looking at the program and I'm trying to calculate how long will this be, if they do an encore, But one performance that I recently went to that was not part of my kind of course of work that I wanted to see, a brand that has not disappointed me yet, is the Chicago Gay Men's Chorus. And our very own Ashley Hardgrave, who's not on the show today because she's rehearsing Mahler 2 with CSO, was the co-book writer for their show this past weekend, which celebrates the chorus's anniversary. They were founded in 1983. So to celebrate that anniversary, they did all songs that were written in 1983. And so I got some Culture Club. I got some Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah.
I got Islands in the Stream, all sung by gay men in unison for the most part with choreo.
I've got a good call. I'm part of a group here in Chicago called Chicago Fringe Opera, where we have our show this weekend, and I'm the producer of the show. And it's not suitable for children, but I took my kids to see the set so they could kind of get a sense of it. And my daughter says, "Oh, so Dad, are you the director of this one?" I was like, "Director?" And she says, "Yeah, the person who tells everybody what to do." I said, No, I'm not the director. I'm the producer. And she says, "Oh, I see. You're the one who takes all the credit." That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard. Find links to stuff we've talked about at the website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. For our guest, Khori Dastoor, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you return to your forward-facing duties. We're off next week for Memorial Day, but we're back with an all-new show in 2 weeks. You're going to get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more of the rubbish that we loved so much. Join us.